All right, here we are live on YouTube. This is the Zim. This is the Zim video. Thanks a lot for joining. This is also the Creative Mind podcast. So let's break this down. Um, I decided, so this is the MCU after show. This is where we talk about the MCU and what's going on. I forgot to record the other section. So I'm recording it on my desktop as well as on YouTube because this also lives as a podcast. So it lives as a podcast on Creative Mind. It lives as a YouTube show on YouTube. This is the first time I'm doing this show live. I do see there are a couple people that have joined into are watching it. So feel free to say hi. I don't know how this is going to turn out. If you know what it's going to be like completely, because normally this show lasts not half hour to an hour. And I normally, part of why I decided to do it live this time is because I'm trying to figure out the workflow of how to do it with recording it and doing the podcast version and having good audio for both. And I was matching up the audio onto the video, and it was kind of a process, and it wasn't actually matching perfectly. So I'd have to do this weird finagling to make it match perfectly. But then I was like, why don't I just try it live? That way the video portion is matched. It's done. I don't have to think about it. And then the audio portion that I'm playing that I do on Creative Mind will work itself out. But that's kind of why I'm doing it live. So if you have any questions about that, feel free to chime in. Let me know. There's a few things before we jump in. So we're going to talk about The Falcon and the Winter Soldier, episode 5. Truth was the name of the title. We're going to talk about that. Hey, Zachary, thanks for checking in, letting me know you're here. And we're going to talk about that. But first, this show is not, this show is kind of like there's usually a show like The Falcon and the Winter Soldier that's the vehicle to produce this show, the MCU after show, because there's been the series of The Falcon and the Winter Soldier. However, this is also a place to talk about the greater MCU. Hey, James, what's going on? If you want to ask me something about the MCU, what my thoughts are, feel free to ask in the comment in the chat function. But we're just going to talk about, the Falcon and Winter Soldier, and this is also a place to talk about just the MCU as a whole. So there's the two things I want to talk about right out the gate before we get into breaking down the show Falcon and Winter Soldier. And that is, so Shang-Chi and the Ten Rings trailer dropped, which is another MCU show coming up. I watched it. And to be honest, I was underwhelmed on this first iteration of the trailer, like this first version. I'm completely stoked to see the movie, to watch it. Completely stoked. I know there's no chance that I'm not gonna watch it or anything. But this first trailer, I was like, they didn't really tell me anything enough for me as a avid MCU fan. They didn't show me what more this movie is going to offer. They just showed, okay, this is going to be reminiscent. There were two things that right away I noticed in the trailer, which was feels like The Matrix, and that makes sense because the director of photography worked on The Matrix, is working on this, so there's that element going on. I didn't write down the name of the person. But then also definitely this Crouching Tiger, Hidden Dragon vibe with the wire work that they're doing, which will be interesting. So visually, there were some references there, which seemed like predictable to me. Like I expected those things to happen. But they didn't show me anything in the trailer that really made me go, oh, this is the other layer of information they're going to give us. Like, a lot of movies like Ant-Man, and Ant-Man is like a heist movie, right? You have Captain America Winter Soldier is a espionage thriller. You have, Ragnarok, which is like a buddy comedy. So it's like there's these layers, and I don't really know what the layer that Shang-Chi and the Ten Rings is going to bring us other than just kind of an action-packed comic book movie. I hope there's something different about it. Obviously, there's a lot of references to that, like Chinese action movies and kung fu movies and those things, but for me that's not enough. I need something more than that, because that's super predictable. I hope they have something more, and I'm sure they will, because as we know with the MCU, they release trailers in a way that they give you like the action. They kind of gave us the action trailer and showed us the characters, but then they're gonna give us the trailer that's heavier on jokes, you know. And then so I imagine they'll give us the trailer that hopefully, if there is another layer to this movie, they'll give us that trailer where you'll be like, oh, this is what else they're telling us in this movie. The only movie personally, so one of my, I don't know, this is polarizing, but one of my least favorite of the MCU's is Black Panther, because I felt like they didn't give us enough. What else is this movie? It just felt like a comic book movie. But maybe I need to watch it again. I did only watch that one once. Maybe I'll give it another shot and see, because I love Black Panther. I love Chadwick Boseman. I love the characters. I love all the characters they had in the movie. There's a lot to the movie, but I just didn't feel like when I watched it, it didn't feel like they gave me that extra layer of unexpected, what I've come to appreciate about the MCU. They didn't give me that. But it's one thing I learned by watching. You know, I've been doing there's a couple places online like I like to check out. I check out the John Campea show. It's a YouTube show. I check out. These are all YouTube shows. I check out New Rock Stars. I check out the Rob Core, Comic Books Explained, and I can't remember. He renamed his second channel. It used to be called Pop Culture Explained. But anyways, all three, I've been able to take in some content from all three of those in the span of time. This show right now that I'm recording is coming out a little later than I thought it would, but it doesn't really matter, because it gives me a chance to hear what other people have to say and learn a few things that I didn't know. And one of those things was this short called All Hail the King, which references the Mandarin from Iron Man 3. And that whole Slattery, or like the actor, you know, Ben Kingsley, who played this role of like the fake Mandarin. And then they introduced the Ten Rings then, but I never saw this short. So I checked it out. I found it online. It was really not difficult, but there was no like just straight American release of it. It seems like it was released with the UK version of Thor 3, not 3, The Dark World, or something. But anyways, I missed it. I just, you know, someone that's a pretty, you know, tries to keep up on what's going on with the MCU and things. I just totally missed it. But so I checked it out. So that was like this introduction to the Ten Rings in a lot of ways, and what's going on there. And so I don't know. I just wanted to point that out. But the reason I brought these two things up seem significant to me, because we are coming up on the last episode of The Falcon and the Winter Soldier, and there's going to be a reveal of some kind. We need to learn who the power broker is. That's a big reveal we're still waiting on. But then, you know, where's the connecting threads of the rest of the MCU? Obviously, there's the Black Widow kind of movie and something going on there, which is closely related to Falcon and Winter Soldier, because it's like the military wing of the MCU, whereas WandaVision was like the mystical, the kind of wizards and kind of side of the MCU. Whereas Falcon and Winter Soldier is related to the military side, the government side of the MCU, which is Black Widow falls in clearly. And then are they going to, because they introduced this trailer for Shang-Chi, are they setting up the audience to say, don't be as surprised if we connect the dots now, if we start to connect Shang-Chi and the Ten Rings to Falcon and the Winter Soldier? We'll see. We'll see what happens there. So let's get on to the main part of this show, which is talking about episode 5 of Falcon and Winter Soldier, which was titled Truth. Before we do that, I just want to remind anybody and everybody that, you know, you can support this channel by jumping on the super chats, doing that thing, hitting the applause on the videos, and then of course patreon.com/the Zim. And because I'm kind of doing stuff a little different, I like to give shout outs to all the current Patreon supporters. So I'm going to do that real quick. We got Anthony Saya, Mark Delegdalo, James Steele, Barry M, Bart Nupnu, Brendan Smith, Matthew Bacher, Rowan Chamberlain, and Michael Knapp are all the current Patreon supporters. Thanks so much for your support. I really appreciate it. All right, let's get back into this show, shall we? The way I like to design this show is I like to talk about each character. I go down the list of the prominent characters that were in the episode, because usually themes and ideas of the entire show come up when I talk about each character. Just a way to make it a little bit different for me doing this show than maybe the way other people do it. I didn't have any overarching themes that I wrote down that don't necessarily relate to one character, but I do want to stress again why I think this show is so good. And it's like it's forcing us, if we want to pay attention, it's forcing us to confront, issues that are current within our society right now, from like racism is a big thing that they're clearly talking about in this show. Huge. And hopefully it's giving a lot of people a moment to reflect on and think about. I mean, they brought up well, we'll talk about Isaiah later. I'll save this for when we talk about Isaiah. But yeah, they're bringing up stuff. And then the other idea that they're really addressing, which I think is super important, is the kind of concept of mental health has been a theme. Every episode seems to address something about mental health. And there was a great sequence in this episode about mental health. Was it something that I think is super important that we destigmatize, like we make more, normalized is mental health, and talking about mental health and dealing with it ourselves and being comfortable, talking about it to each other, and just the idea and mentioning things like I go to therapy and not have it be something like, oh, what's wrong with you? It's like when you go to the gym and you're working out, people, the first thing they don't say is like, what's wrong with you? They say, good job for working out. Why can't it be the same thing about your brain? I mean, it should be the same thing. It's like we have to take care of each part of our body. We have to eat right. We have to diet. We have to exercise. We have to take care of the brain is another piece of the body that needs to be taken care of. So therapy and mental health, super important, and should never be made. No one should ever be made feel bad for working on that part of their being. And this show is opening up this idea to a lot of people. It's addressing it, and hopefully people are reflecting on it and saying, this is something worth talking about in a show like this, where it's, action and fun and MCU stuff. They're giving us real content to contemplate, which is what I think one of the things that's making this show so good. And the other thing is the characters, and it's kind of, character development, which was this episode. Okay, here's an overarching kind of theme of this episode. When I was talking last week about, I hope they bring, last week's episode 4 was super action packed, probably the most action packed of all the episodes. And then I was like, I really hope they bring it down again and kind of get back to this character place rather than the constant action. And I thought I kind of predicted that they would do that, and that's exactly what they did. They kind of went back to the formula they've been using, which is give the audience some kind of action sequence at the beginning and then kind of ride it out into characters. Like we're developing characters, we're letting the audience know more and more about these characters, so that when they do show up in a feature, a major moment, we know more about them. We can bring a lot more to their characters. Thanks, Danny, for chiming in. Danny says mental health and all the issues within are always stigmatized in a negative light. Yeah, I agree. I think I believe we're getting, we are becoming enlightened. That doesn't need to be that way as a society. More and more people like our or I don't know how old you are, but younger generations and more people are being okay. Where my parents' generation, it was way more stigmatized. But I think as we move along, it's becoming more apparent that it's okay to talk about. All right, and speaking of like mental health in a lot of ways, I think this episode, I really feel like was Sam's episode in a lot of ways. I mean, a lot of them, Sam seems to be kind of the top of the pyramid character of the show. I mean, it's the Falcon and the Winter Soldier, but I really feel like the Falcon is maybe the most important, obviously, because of this relationship of Captain America. Is he going to become the next Captain America? That's the big question. Like, is he really going to take on that mantle? What does that mean? I just remember there's another character we have to talk about. I'm going to write down. Actually, a lot of people got some screen time this episode, so there's kind of like a good amount of people to talk about. So I really felt like this was Sam's episode. I love the journey that he's going through with figuring out like who he is and who he wants to be. And I love how grounded, like how wise of a character he is, you know, and like the scene, I think maybe my favorite sequence talking about mental health was when he's talking to Bucky, and it's he's telling him, Bucky, to like, you know, to make amends. It's really about how can he be of service to the other people that he needs, not just like, you know, what he said, avenge things and do it the way he phrased it in the show, but to actually make like amends by offering service, to bringing closure for people. And so I really, that was probably my favorite sequence, was that conversation they had in that kind of moment. One thing to point, so here's a thing to point out. So one of the things I've loved the most about this show is how cinematic it feels. How like it doesn't feel like a TV show. It feels more cinematic. Like everything feels really on point. This, and I've been mentioning that every episode. This episode, actually, there were some, for me, a kink in the armor of this kind of feeling cinematic the whole time. And I did watch it twice just to double check to make sure I felt the same way. Well, I try to watch them twice anyway, at least before I do this show. But I was particularly looking for one moments that happened that I was like, you know, I wasn't so sure. And where it came in was, I really think it was a poor choice to use the guitar lines in the soundtrack. I know you might be thinking like, what is it, Zim? You're talking about the soundtrack? And yes, I am talking about the soundtrack. And when they got to where Sam lives, his home, and they got to the boat sequence, they were using this guitar vibe that in the soundtrack that pulled me out of the movie, because it felt like public domain kind of. It didn't feel as thought out. You know, it felt like stuff that we could find when we're producing our own videos and stuff, and we want to put a soundtrack on, and we have access to YouTube's, I don't know, music library that we can use as public, you know, copyright free music. It really didn't feel like it had the quality that the rest of the show has had, is the way the soundtrack was in that section. And I really wish they would not have used the guitar. I think they needed to go either full into that vibe, like make it like they did that one section where they had this kind of like Zydeco band vibe that was like, it wasn't a soundtracky thing, it was like a band music. They needed to go that direction, or they needed to just get rid of that guitar lick and just have it be the other sounds that were inside of it. And it showed up in a couple places, and it kind of took me out of the show, and I just felt like it lowered the overall quality of this particular episode. But not to say lowered it from super high to okay, you know. So there it was. But so that was the thing that I was thinking about. Let's so the part with Bucky. So another thing about Sam before we move off Sam, and I'll probably come back around to it. It was interesting the way they kind of edited the sequences of, so Sam and Bucky are doing their little catch with the disc, and it was interesting that they did that sequence, and Sam didn't seem to have a problem catching the shield, but then when they did the training montage, he was struggling. And was it just because he was like trying to throw it harder, or what? I don't know. It just seemed like maybe the editing was a little bit funny in that section, but I don't know. That was an interesting kind of thing that I noticed. And then moving to the beginning, so we'll talk about Bucky as well. Why was John Walker able to like really put up a fight against Sam and Bucky? Like, we have a super soldier, we have the Winter Soldier, who's been doing this for 100 years, and we have Sam, who's not a super soldier, but it's 2 against 1 at least, and they're clearly showing he has skills with the wingsuit. Like, he knows how to use the wingsuit to recognize that he isn't a super soldier, so he needs to use other things, like he uses the jetpack to accelerate his punches and do different things, and like he like spins around with the wings open and trips John Walker. And I guess it was all just designed for the show, just to have a a decent action sequence at the beginning, but I really felt like John Walker shouldn't have been able to put up as much of a fight as he was able to, because like it took even Captain America, like as he progressed years, he progressed through the show to get to how strong he ended up being with the super serum and stuff. And John Walker basically just got the super serum, and he's already able to keep up with Bucky and Sam. I don't know. That just didn't quite make a lot of sense to me. I didn't get it, but I guess I get it for the idea of they needed a solid action sequence for the beginning of the show. And notice they found a way to knock Bucky out, for a minute with his arm getting like, I don't know, needed a reset. And so it was just like a non-super soldier versus, so I don't know. It was just it just didn't seem like it should have played out the way it did, but it did. But I actually, with Bucky, there's nothing else I really want to add today about Bucky. His main point, his main kind of, the biggest moment for me was that his realization of what he needs to do to not to kind of fully let go of the Winter Soldier. Like the Winter Soldier is still inside of him because he's still having these nightmares. And when he had the conversation with Sam, that seems to be the paramount point of when he's gonna, that what's gonna happen in this last episode. He's probably gonna, have a conversation with the old man from the beginning, the first episode, and that'll be the point where he really starts to let go of the Winter Soldier in a way, to fully heal from that, in a way. Which brings me, somebody like John Campea, the John Campea Show, said this concept of like, what if the White Wolf becomes his moniker moving forward versus the Winter Soldier? Like, what if he like totally take the Winter Soldier out of how they describe him, even in like show titles and things, and they call him the White Wolf? That could be interesting for John. So John Walker, interesting story arc that's going on with him. Well, who's the actor? Wyatt. I don't know his last name. I can't remember his last name, but they're doing a really good job of making this somebody that we want to just not like. And he's acting. His acting. I think his acting is on point. Like, props to him for how he's, making this person somebody unlikable, like all the way. It's like we didn't like him from the moment he showed up on screen, and they just keep giving us these little like, yeah, here's another reason not to like him, without being super. Well, they are blatant now by him killing somebody just in broad daylight. It's like, okay, he's super unlikable now, but even just little things like his inability to keep his cool during the hearing. And I get, of course he's been a military officer his whole life, and now he's, losing his pension and all this stuff because of this action. So there's that, and then there's, him lying to Battlestar's parents for saying like who killed him. It's like, who, of course I would, not let the person that killed him get away, and he did though. It's like his rage just took over, and it's just interesting how he's like not able to totally control himself right now, and it's been an interesting arc and a journey as this character. It'll be interesting to see where it goes. Obviously, I mean, we know from the comics he becomes U.S. agent. There's a whole bunch of information. There's a connection with him and the Power Broker in the comics. I don't know if they'll make that connection here and that in this show, but there's also this connection with Thunderbolt Ross, and that whole thing, which leads us into, we'll jump into this new character that showed up in this show, which was kind of like oh my gosh, Julie Louis-Dreyfus is in the MCU as Contessa Valentine, somebody I had no idea who was. I didn't even catch. I was so confused when she got on the screen because I'm not honestly a huge comic book fan. Like, I don't know all the things about the comic book. I'm an MCU fan, and so if they haven't introduced a character in the MCU and explained them, I'm just like everybody else that doesn't know anything and going like, who are these? But luckily I do the YouTube thing and found out a little bit more about her just because the places that I listen to talk about her. And she is a character that's connected with like the government arm of the MCU. She was called like was it like Lady Hydra or Madam Hydra for a minute, where she was playing this double agent role. So the immediate thought was like, is this the power broker? That was kind of like, is she the power broker? Because she came on strong, right? She was like not messing around, and then but then I was like, I'm really still kind of. And then right after that scene, they had the scene with Sharon Carter, and so they maintain this kind of authoritarian, you know, figure of Sharon Carter, which they're. I just have a hard. I'm still not off the train that Sharon Carter is the power broker. I still think that's a possibility. I mean, some people think like the Shang-Chi and the Ten Rings, the main baddies in like the Ten Rings are associated as the power brokers or something, and that's why they introduced the trailer that we talked about earlier. But that's gonna be a thing. But I don't know. I don't see that, to be honest. I see them just saying, eventually saying Sharon Carter's the power broker. That just feels like what's gonna happen. I just don't understand the why she chose that path completely. Like, I get she's bitter, and I get they set up that in the like the episode that she showed up in was like the third episode, I think, or maybe the second. But I get they set that up, that she's bitter and she's frustrated, but I don't know, somebody that's willing to help out like Captain America. And then I don't know, it just seems they have some explaining to do for me. They definitely have some explaining to do. But we're talking about Contessa right now. And so it's interesting to see how she develops. I think there's theories out there that she's connected with like Thunderbolt Ross, and I think that makes sense to me. Like, she's basically helping recruit the Thunderbolts, and by saying, I know the government said you're not allowed, but we have this other thing under the radar that we're building that we want you to be a part of. So don't worry, kind of thing. That kind of, the Thunderbolts are like a kind of a, not an anti Avengers group, but they're just kind of like the misfits in a way, and it's an interesting idea because, which we'll talk about. Well, I'll just save it until we talk about Zemo. But going down my list, I really love they brought back Isaiah and told that story, and told us more about that information. Like I was saying at the beginning, they brought up more of this kind of racism and racial issues, and they're, obviously Sam being in the show is, you're always reminded of this idea with the Captain America relationship, Sam, and that was going on. But they really are driving it home with this conversation whenever they talk to Isaiah. And the interesting part about it too is like, it's not so indifferent than the society we live in right now and what has happened to Black Americans in terms of being experimented on and things like that. There's like real world repercussions of like these ideas that they're bringing up, and they're just making him like comic book superhero. But there's a very clear connection with what has happened in our own society, as well. And so if we're willing to think about it and talk about it, I think it's important. And they're helping us realize these things within the show. And the Isaiah character is one of those characters that's really giving us the opportunity to reflect on this whole situation, which I think is important, and I'm really enjoying. And I hope we get to learn a lot more about Isaiah. I hope there's something more. I feel like they gave us a lot this last episode, and they really drove home like he has no interest in being exposed and being he wants to be dead. Like, he wants to just remain behind the scenes and just. But I'd like to see more about him. While I was watching that sequence, the thing I thought of was a potential series, like a Disney Plus series on him, as like, it wouldn't be necessarily a happy ending, but it would be an interesting to talk about the other soldiers that he fought with and that whole kind of idea. There could be an interesting show to make around that. I don't know if they would do that, but that could be an interesting spin-off idea like this. Obviously not flashback's not the right word, but it's it's outside of the timeline, but it'd be interesting to talk about. And then Sarah had a lot in this issue, in this episode. Sam's sister. I think I love her as a grounding presence in the show. Like, this really brings the human element to the show in a lot of ways. She's not a superhero in any ways, but she she brings this really grounded presence to the episodes and the show as a whole, which I really appreciate. And then of course the whole, what were they, was the flirting between her and Bucky, like, what were they trying to tell us there? Is there actually going to be something there, or is that just a joke? Was that just complete joke, or is there actually something that Bucky's like, this I need somebody like this in my life, like a real grounded person? I don't know. That was an interesting decision. Funny and cute and all that stuff, and gave it a bit of, obviously that MCU comic relief. But interesting choice there. Carly didn't have much in this episode. They showed her kind of like, they really drove home that she's kind of no turning back. It's like she said it in the episode, haven't you heard, we are the criminals, when they were talking with Batroc. So she didn't have much because this episode really wasn't about her. We'll probably definitely see more of her in the next episode because we're in climax time. It's gonna be all out craziness, which will be interesting. We got Batroc the Leaper showed up again, which is cool. I'm glad he's like coming back, reoccurring character, interesting. And the relation there, it's curious to see, like, so Sharon Carter rehired him to do this job for Carly. I don't know. I don't get, maybe I'm missed something, but so if Batroc knows where Carly is and Sharon wants Carly, why didn't they just get her that way? Does Sharon know that all the super serum has been destroyed? I don't know. Interesting. I don't know if there's something within that kind of relationship that I'm not quite clear on yet. Hopefully it'll become clear, because who is Sharon? If Sharon is the power broker and she's totally like, I don't care anymore about anything from my past life, like the relationship with Captain America, Sam, and Bucky, why would she send Batroc after, to help Carly, who's also in that sequence wanting to basically kill Sam? So does Sharon just like not care about anybody anymore and just is all about herself and surviving that way? I don't know. That's an interesting thing that it just didn't quite, all the pieces, there's missing pieces in that whole sequence that I'm not sure about, that I'll be interested to, hopefully we'll discover in the last episode. Zemo, he, obviously another character that didn't have much this time, but he got, taken by the Dora Milaje. Is that how you pronounce it? Dora Milaje? Duru Milaje? I don't know. But he got taken to the raft, they said. And I think that was an important exposition. They wanted to tell us, they wanted to remind us of the raft, of the prison that they all went to, that Thunderbolt Ross kind of was running in a way, because the dots are all starting to connect to this like Thunderbolts idea, because in the comics, Zemo actually kind of led the Thunderbolts or something, or was part of it. They have on the raft already, we know, we can only speculate that the Abomination's over there, so there's that person. We now have I'm sure John Walker's gonna get over there, from what I mentioned about Contessa, Val, and I just feel like they're setting us up to have some kind of team up in this other kind of way. So that'll be interesting to see what develops there. And then the last person I wanted to talk about today is Torres, because I didn't know this until I heard it online, but that sequence where he takes the wings from Sam. So the wings are destroyed. He takes the wings from Sam, and then when Sam, it was a pretty deliberate moment where Torres goes, what about the wings? And Sam goes, you keep them. And they like frame Sam, because in the comics, it turns out Torres becomes the Falcon. And maybe they're just implying that to fans. Maybe that was just fan service, or maybe that's actually going to happen. I don't know. It feels like the character is kind of a throwaway character. It doesn't feel like he's going to show up a lot more. So I don't I don't get the sense that they cast somebody that they want to be a lead character like that. But maybe they do. Maybe they like it. But that also brings me to like, well, if, like, where's this? What's in this? What's in the box? You know, and it seems like the box that the Wakandans gave. You know, Bucky said, I still need a favor from you guys, or want a favor. And my thought right away, I was like, oh, he's gonna ask for was not adamantium, but vibranium wings. He's gonna ask for vibranium wings for Sam, and that's what I think's in the box. But another thought I had was maybe, which doesn't make sense for the shape of the box, but maybe they built him a new shield that's not a Captain America shield. It's like, okay, we understand that this shield means something because it belonged to Steve Rogers. Here is a shield for you, or maybe it's both. I don't know. Maybe it's wings and a shield, because I guess I don't know. It really, what I've heard online as well, it feels like this potential of, you know, Bucky taking on the mantle of Captain America, or not Bucky, Sam actually is going to take on the mantle of Captain America and be Captain America. Like the end of the show that's gonna be kind of one of the reveals, is that he is Captain America, which brings me to this last little part that I'm gonna wrap it up with, which is kind of, well, not only I want to talk about a little bit about expectations. This is what I'm talking about now, is expectations for the last episode. We know there's gonna be an all out battle of, it's gonna be action packed awesomeness. But what are they gonna tell us? What are they gonna reveal to us? We're gonna get revealed what entity is behind all this. Hopefully we'll get a sense of who the power broker is. Maybe they won't. Maybe they won't tell us yet, because, you know, there's this little idea that this Falcon and Winter Soldier may become a series where this is not the only edition of it. It may continue on, because of how they're applying for awards for the show, or for Emmy Awards. I don't know if you heard about this yet, but, you know, they're not applying under the limited series. They're applying under like a continuing series. And it was just happened like today. So there's an idea stirring out there now that maybe this is a continuation. So maybe it's like the continuation is, it becomes Captain America and the Winter Soldier again, or like Captain America and what I mentioned earlier and the White Wolf. If Bucky is able to say, like, I am no longer the Winter Soldier because of this, what Sam and Bucky have been working, like what Sam helped him work through, like, you need to give service to these people. You need to, you know, find a way to do that and not just kind of, you know, get revenge in a way, or avenge, or how it's interesting that they chose to use the word avenge there. But so maybe they'll call it, you know, Captain America and the White Wolf will be the new name of the show, or something like that. Interesting to think about what they're going to reveal to us, and how it's going to connect to possibly Shang-Chi and the Ten Rings, how it's going to connect to what we'll end up seeing in the Black Widow movie, and if there's a connection there. Interesting to remember those kind of things. But yeah, so that's it for today. Thanks guys for hanging out. If it looks like there's a couple of you on the stream listening to me ramble on about the MCU, if you have any thoughts you want to drop into the questions you want to ask me about anything about the MCU, feel free to do it. I'll see if you're interested for a few minutes here. But we pretty much covered it, and thanks a lot for listening. I'll just remind you while you're thinking about it, if you want to ask me anything, this show appears on YouTube, but it's also a podcast. It'll be on Creative Mind Podcast, and the link to it, if you'd rather just subscribe to the podcast, you could the link to it is in the description of the YouTube video. And of course, if you're listening to it on the podcast right now and you want to comment about something, you want to say like, Zim, I think you're crazy, I don't think you know what you're talking about, you could jump over to the YouTube side, youtube.com/thezimvideo, and post a comment. But it doesn't look like anybody that's watching right now has anything they want to add or ask a question about. So I'm going to sign out. Thanks a lot for listening. Thanks a lot for being here. And catch up with you again next week. It'll be, I try to do these on Sunday. This last week, I was really busy, and combination of busy and just lots of things. So I couldn't get to it until now. It's Wednesday. But cool. Thanks, James. See you. Appreciate it. And I appreciate your guys' support. All right. Till next time, be loving, kind, and patient.